Hi, my name is Lee Davis, one of the pastors here at Berlin Church in Lewis Center.
And I'm Rick Negley. Thank you for joining us today.
We're following up from our teaching in Paul's letter to the Colossian church from chapter 4, verses 2 through 6 from this past Sunday, in regard to Paul's call to the church in Colossae, and by extension to us, to be engaged both in prayer and in activity, and actually proclaiming both with our mouths and with our lives the good news of Jesus to those around us. And so today we are going to talk a bit about how we pray for those in our lives who still need Jesus, who need to come to faith in Him and be reconciled to God. So Rick, what comes to mind for you as you think about how we can pray for those in our lives who need Jesus?
Well, Jesus said that no one can come to the Father unless the Father draws them to faith. And so we can be praying that God would work in their hearts, that He would open their eyes to see the truth of the gospel, that He would open their ears to hear it in a way that is meaningful to them, that He would soften hearts to receive the gospel, to receive Jesus, and to believe on His name. And then that also that God would remove any props that people are relying on rather than the God Himself. And that might be the trinkets of this world, like money, sex, power, prestige, whatever it might be, that God would remove those things and help us to treasure Jesus Christ, help others to treasure Him as well.
I had a mom and a father, but I think particularly my mom, who prayed for me for a long time. I grew up in a pastor's home, but for the first 16 years of my life or so, though I kept up appearances in many ways, my heart was far from God. I think probably it goes without saying that my mom's prayers were used by God to bring my hard heart to hear the gospel of Jesus and to turn to Him. Others of you have friends and family members that you've been praying for even longer than that, and it's easy to lose heart. But we can't change anyone's hearts. Only God can do that. We have a responsibility to pray and to tell, but only God can open hearts. Only God can open a door for the Word to declare the mystery of Christ, to turn hard hearts into soft hearts, to open the eyes of the blind, these biblical metaphors that are used throughout the Scriptures. And so I would encourage you, as I need to learn as well, to not lose heart in prayer, even for those who are seemingly very far away from God, who have very hard hearts. There are examples in church history and examples in our own experience where God has used the long-term patient prayers of His people to bring people to Himself. As we said on Sunday in our teaching from Colossians chapter 4, though God is sovereign over all things, even in drawing people to Himself, He uses the prayers of His people to accomplish His purposes. So if your son or daughter has wandered away from how you raised them, has seemingly hardened themselves against the good news of Jesus, my friends, please don't lose heart. If you've been sharing the good news with your brother or sister, or your mom or your dad, or your coworker, or your best friend for many years, and you're beginning to lose heart, don't lose heart. God uses your prayers to bring about His sovereign purposes. One final story before we close today. I remember when I was growing up and a teenager and had finally turned to Christ and became interested in other people doing the same. One of my best friends, who ended up being in my wedding years later, his mom was a faithful believer, but his dad wasn't. And so we joined with my friend in praying for his dad for a long, long time. And finally, years later, this man came to Christ. His name's Jerry. And as I spoke to one of his other sons just the other day, Jerry himself, who once was far away from Jesus, has now turned into a vibrant proclaimer of Jesus. God used the prayer of his faithful wife and his children and friends to bring him to faith. And so God does answer these prayers, even long term, even when it seems like nothing's happening, to bring about His purposes of gracious salvation. Thank you so much for joining us today. We love you, and we'll see you soon.